Evening.
Evening. How are we doing?
Good. Yeah, so we didn't record last week because I had a birthday party to go to, mine, um, and I moved into my next decade, which
Yeah,
was
big achievement. It's gotta be a weird feeling.
a little bit. It was really interesting. It's like it felt like I lost the excuse of thinking that I am getting the hang of adulting or faking it till I'm making it, and it's just like, right, yeah, I'm an adult. It's like if I haven't got the hang of it by 30, then that's pretty pathetic. And all the evidence is that I have got the hang of it to a sufficiently indistinguishable degree. So, oh, well, I must be a competent adult then. And some interesting
But
confidence that came from that.
hmm.
It
Yeah, I
quite
suppose some of the excuses removed, but also some of the what's the word? Lack of seriousness.
imposter syndrome.
No, like a social pass that's given to people in their 20s.
Hmm.
And with that taken away, they're inherently taken more seriously. And that's got to be nice in its own way.
I'm not sure if I've perceived the difference in how other people are acting, but I've felt that internally.
Mm. But I imagine that would be a reflection of you observing that in the wider culture. So we all
Yeah,
sort of bring these things into ourselves,
yeah. It's like,
even if you haven't personally experienced it yourself. I mean, just a thing
hmm.
that you would have noticed over time.
Yeah, because once you get to 30, you kind of expected to have your stuff together.
Mm,
Hmm.
yeah, a person at 30 who isn't altogether is no longer just a silly 20-year-old. It's like, okay, you're a mighty fuck up now,
Hmm.
but that's not you, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't think any of the usual vices apply.
Mm. I'd say you have some of your own, but I mean, we all do.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So
in
how'd it go? What did you do for your birthday?
oh, that was just a birthday dinner at my parents', invited some friends around, one who was a uni friend and one who's an older friend who I met at the radio club, and he brought his 15-year-old daughter and wife, and everyone had a good time. I got a box, filled it with the more solid type of packing foam, and shot arrows at it with a bow that I got on my 21st, so it hasn't had enough use and had some fun.
That does sound like pretty cool times.
Yeah, and then
Very very you.
yeah, yeah, just nice and simple and fun chatting and yeah, yeah, it's very satisfying to hear the thunk of an arrow hitting a target.
Oh yeah, believe me, I know. We had a little toy compound one that we played with for a long time. It still works fine. We broke all the arrows by hitting things.
Yeah.
It's good fun during quarantine. We were up in Hamner. And we were in this. It's a home technically, but it's one of those homes that's like a couple $1 million kind of homes. And
Hmm.
we were house sitting for like 3 days, and then that second round of uh, lockdown. Yeah, we'll call it that. And it was quite fun because we got stuck there for like a month in this beautiful home, and there's a massive lawn outside. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like an archery lawn. Oh wait, so we could set up a target, 100 meters away, and sort of aim up into the sky and try and arc it into it. It was quite good fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Some other stuff. Now.
You don't need a license for one. That's another pro.
Oh, for a bow. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You can get a compound bow that would do the job, and no license required for
Oh,
that.
a friend of mine got a proper crossbow.
Yeah, oh yeah, same kind of deal.
Yeah, and there are some compound crossbows which I saw someone comparing a modern crossbow that was had a lower pound rating um, with a medieval crossbow, and the medieval one was harder to load but had much less penetrating power. And then you have the modern one. It's like, yeah, here's an armor plate. Here's the hole in the armor plate.
Yeah, compounding bows are amazing.
Oh yeah,
Been meaning to get my hands on a couple of those for a while. I'm gonna do that again because yeah, our one works, but it is effectively a children's toy.
well, mine's a it's a
Pink.
Chinese knockoff compound, but it's a fully functional compound
Yeah,
bow.
yeah, it might be something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got a little pink one, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah, well, this is a full
Not that
30
my
pound
kids are old
bow.
enough.
The
Oh
um
wow.
the 15-year-old daughter who came along with her dad, my son had great fun playing with her. It's like she arrived and hey, ran off and play with her, and yeah, he just monopolized her the whole time, and it's like good, occupied, having fun.
Yep. Good preoccupation for a
Yeah.
15-year-old girl.
But she tried to draw it and couldn't. Or I think she managed to draw it once, but yeah.
All right.
So it's a proper
So yeah,
bow.
proper bow.
Yeah.
Oh well, you get something better than nothing.
Yeah. But it's been interesting. Like, I like to go ice skating on Friday nights to pretend I'm being social. It's better than just sitting alone in the house.
Oh no,
And
it's great. I just think that's funny.
yeah. But it's interesting the way my self-perception shifted, catalyzed with the birthday. I feel like it's the sort of self-confidence that teenagers sometimes pretend to have, like the confident teenagers, in terms
Mm.
of feeling. Oh, how now? Ice skating this Friday. There were a few girls who it was obviously their first time, and one who was very uncertain, like both hands on the wall, going around the edge carefully, and she stuck with it the whole time. And I stopped a few times and gave her tips and encouragement and so on, and she was appreciative of that. And while skating around, because I'd give her a few tips and some encouragement, and then go off and do my own thing. And the thought occurred, and I'm not sure whether it was. Oh, here's a goal to aim for, here's how you subconsciously think you should act, or here's how you are feeling. But it was sort of, I don't care. As in, if she expresses interest back, and
Mm.
it was interesting to see. It's like, oh, yeah, well, that seems fair. Well, that's an interesting way to feel of sort of, I'll do my thing, but if you're not interested, then I don't care. And it's like, oh, surprising. And then afterwards, when the session was ending, um, chatted and she was having trouble getting her boots off. So I was just like, here's the lever to pull. Here's the button to push to get the strap to release. And just sort of, she was trying to get it, so I just reach and pull the lever. It's like, oh, you pushed a button on your phone and you dropped out.
Yeah, that is more advantages of beta software. Let's not do that again.
Yeah, but she and her friends
Oh,
seemed to be looking forward to seeing me next time.
well, that's good.
Yeah,
But
and
your note about not caring is really important. I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but you said about being confident,
mm,
and would the term self assured fit better? Do you think?
I think so. I don't have a fleshed out meaning for that. There's the sort of picked up meaning, but I haven't got a precise definition of it. But It feels
It
about
just
right.
it yeah, it popped into my head because you mentioned that you went over and you helped,
Mm,
and then you went off and you did your own thing, and then you came back and you helped, and you went off and did your own thing, and you had this reaction of, oh, I don't actually care if she expresses interest or not.
mm,
If she did, cool, but if not, not.
mm. And in the
You
break
you don't
when,
need anything from her.
yeah, yeah, in the break when they were smoothing the ice, so everyone has to get off it for 15 minutes while the Zambini's driving around, Zamboni, however you pronounce it. Um, no, I saw the temptation to try and get into a conversation with them and so on, and sort of stood watching the machine go around the ice for a while, sort of looking at that temptation, then went off and read something on my phone until the machine was done, then headed back out. And it felt strategically right and comfortable.
Well, that's good.
Hmm.
It could go any way.
Yeah.
For some people, the approach would have worked. For some people, it wouldn't.
Hmm.
But in your reaction of this is right for me is exactly what you need to be doing. I don't want to make this big, how I give coaching advice on doing this stuff. I sort of hate the sound of myself when I do that, but I really do believe that there's a moment that changes a man's life, which is when he stops needing anything from a woman,
Hmm.
and that's the moment when he finds one.
Well, I have like it wasn't just that time that the single thought arrived. Like there was a bit of crystallization of it, but the idea of oh, I think someone said it in a podcast clip I saw. I'm trying to remember the exact words. I've got the feeling of the statement along the lines of, oh no, it was a song. It was a song. Like woman come, woman go, and singing about how they'd come into his life and go away again, and that's part of life, and it's like he's doing his thing, and oh, sometimes there'll be a woman, and that's nice, and then sometimes she'll go, and that's life. And that went around my head for a little bit, like, oh, just do your thing, and don't really care.
Um, mm, that's a tough one. I have so many problems with that idea, but
It's probably a good counterbalance to where I'm coming at it from, rather than a good absolute position.
yeah, yeah, I can't help but have that reaction when I hear things like that these days. But there's truth in the idea that you need to be on your own path.
Hmm.
You can't be looking to a woman to lead, and for as long as you need a woman, that's what you're looking for, and no woman is looking for that from you. Which is
Hmm.
why men who are desperate for a woman will never find one. Um, but on the other side of that, I definitely am a big believer in not being with, well, more than one person.
Hmm. In the
But
sense
that's
of,
sort of a side issue.
yeah, in the sense of it's not something to treat casually, but at the same time, it's not something to be your singular goal that you pursue. It's something to happen when you're doing things right
Mm.
as a
You need to,
consequence.
yeah, you need to do your thing and to leave the door open
Hmm.
and to make sure that through your behavior you don't close that door. Like say taking the opportunity for sleeping around if it arose.
Hmm.
That's closing the door on the potential great partner.
Hmm.
Some people don't get together until they're 30 or 40, and they're glad that they waited for that person,
Hmm.
actually waited their, whole adult life.
There's something
So,
else that
yeah.
um sort of tangentially related, but in terms of the confidence and self-assurance stuff that related to oh, not the right words, but I'm trying to get the meaning across, like arrogance and confidence and uh, the ability to tell someone to F off in general.
Mm.
That oh, like we had the episode a while back where I had my first ever drink of alcohol, and
Mm.
I've noticed that I have a similar flavor of feeling towards swearing. Like I can talk about swear words in a sort of abstract scientific sense, but there's a similar, not as big, but similar thing in the way of using them in vehemence. And like as I
Yes.
was trying to sort of crystallize emotional states, just trying to get the hang of them, I was using mental imagery like the raw violence I'd previously crystallized as a samurai sword that turned out black. Um, and that one, I tried sort of bringing that up, and the sort of words that came with it were well diving, as in if that comes up, it's like that's the attitude that goes out with it. Like you want if someone does something to necessitate that, then that's the attitude that it brings out with it. And then the next one, sort of down in intensity, I was using the Joe or staff that's about armpit height that I'm learning to use at Aikido. It's a much less deadly weapon, and the sort of descriptive emotional phrasing that came from that one was fuck off, which I've never said in anger to anyone.
Have you thought about it? Like a temptation.
Possibly. But yeah, and then
Fantasize, maybe?
the idea of that kind of violence in language is one I have been playing with and examining because like the sensei the aikido after the lesson a bunch of us went across to a cafe and had a drink and some stuff. He was talking about how he'd been trying to sell a car that had been stolen and bashed up and then retrieved on Trade Me, and someone from the wreckers came and then said, "Oh, I'll give you 400 for it." No, the price on Trade Me was 600, and that developed and got steadily more vehement as a confrontation until eventually in a phone conversation with the guy's boss, it was like, no, no, it was 600. And so the whole thing just petered out then. And he just paid the price that had been agreed. But the sensei is a very friendly guy most of the time. Like he's great at teaching the kids and the right balance of playful aggression to get their attention, but let them have fun. And I haven't seen an aggressive side of him, but it was interesting to hear that described. And that's the sort of potential that I think I hope to develop. Not so much say, saying I am strong, but I have strength was something I came up with. Like the idea that I'm acquiring an aspect rather than making it my whole self.
Mm. Yeah, bringing it into yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, and so when I bring up the imagery of the Joe, the fighting stick that I was associating with the um, personal strength emotions, you could say. Um, oh, like it brings forth s- a confrontation ability similar to what I described with the car situation, and you're trying to get the hang of that and work out how to utilize it, and being able to vehemently tell someone to fuck off seems to be a part of that. And it's a little bit weird to say those words having barely said them, although at the moment it's in a sort of clinical mind state, so I can say them just as sounds rather than as emotional meanings.
Mm. They'll trigger something in you as they used. I'm pretty sure they use a different part of the brain
Hmm.
than normal speech, but I find it. I personally find it hard to understand this conversation with you. We've had it a few times. Um, to me, it's hard to imagine a person who's lived a life where there was no situation that arose that developed within him the urge to say those words. From the way you've described things, it's very academic. It's very reaching for a concept beyond you,
Hmm.
and it
Well,
seems strange to me that you haven't, I don't know, been in a position where you would have the instinct
I
to reach for
used
something like that.
like flip and frack and damn and things like that. At a similar age when I decided not to be violent or to manifest aggression in a or not to be aggressive to others, I also decided not to manifest that in speech.
They're integrally linked.
Yeah, yeah. And so they're mutually reinforcing.
Hmm. I really wonder what the actual decision was.
I feel like
I
it
have for a
has,
while.
yeah, I feel like it's, now there's, from when I was younger, probably less than 10, definitely. Like, probably less than 7, I would guess. When mum was still going to Catholic church because that's how she'd been brought up. So she went because she'd gone as a child and that had been her upbringing. And dad was never interested. He doesn't see the point in religion and perceives it only as a sort of crowd control mechanism by those who figure out the way to get on the controlling side of it. I can certainly see that happens sometimes. Um, but I remember being young and wanting to be good, like big capital G. I wanted to be a good person. Not really sure what that was, but I wanted to be good, and so I seized on a bunch of things that felt like the right thing to do. And I've got an inkling, nothing I can pin it to, but that there was also a stick as well as a carrot in my head for that. Like, it might be what I've talked about before with feeling being a sensitive child, feeling hurt by adults' aggression and being determined not to be that. Not physical aggression or anything like that, but just the the scariness of the world and the
Power.
yeah, and also like other children. Just it's almost like my. I wonder if the encounter with childhood malevolence led to a rejection of malevolence, not a assumption that it didn't exist, but it's like, yeah, it exists. Yeah, there are mean children. Yeah, there's adults who are mean, and like news stories came up, so I was exposed to, at least in abstract, the harsh realities of the world. Like Dad used to call the news the daily death toll because it would always go into, oh, this many people died in this country. So it wasn't like the world is all lovely and roses and pretty. It was like stuff happens. And like my reaction to that, half of this is speculation, but it's just coming from speaking from emotion, not logic. Um, a rejection of yeah, I reject the malevolence. I will not be part of that type
Okay.
rejection.
I think there's an interesting confusion here that I could see a young mind easily making.
Hmm.
Because to me, it sounds like okay, you wanted to be good and you wanted to reject evil.
Hmm.
But I think there's a strong possibility that what you rejected was power. The means by which evil actions can be undertaken.
Hmm.
Because you mentioned the power, well, not the power. You mentioned the aggression that adults had towards you and that other kids had towards each other and you.
Hmm.
And these were power. These are power plays. I'm in charge of you. I'm better than you.
Yeah. And these were things like I
And
remember the principal was scary at that time in the school and
mm,
things like that. There was a other teachers who I felt were mean and things like that.
yeah, it's this assumption that many children have when they're young, particularly ones from a good home, because they don't experience it with their parents, and then the world forces them to accept it, which is, I think, what happened to me, except I was out for probably longer than you were, and then it was a bit of a rougher awakening. Um, and the idea is that at home, when a child is young, in a healthy home, they're raised effectively without power. Like there's authority, but reasonable and can be negotiated with.
Hmm.
And then the social world is where they encounter their first real interaction with power, which generally comes through some form of status game, whether adult to child relationships or children to children.
Yeah, and I was
And
always confused by that status game and therefore not in it.
yeah, I was like that too, which I think is interesting that this is a thing to hit on. I don't know if this is, what do you call it, an autistic thing or something else. I was actually talking with my wife about this the other day, and I feel like there's not really any not arrogant way to say it. Consciousness is still developing in humanity, and it doesn't develop everywhere all at once equally. And I think that there's something in what people who are referred to as autistic see as conscious awareness of the status game, conscious awareness of sexual selection and evolution. Whereas I think for a majority of human history, it's been not conscious.
Hmm.
People acting it out, playing their status game hierarchies to get position and get mating and da 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 da. And then along comes people in increasing numbers who look at that and have to integrate it consciously It's not something pre-built into them, which indicates a shift, pulling that out of unconsciousness and putting it into consciousness, which means that evolution has become culturally acknowledged enough that it's passed from the stage of myth to the stage of integration. It's something we've lost out of the unconscious, which is our foundation, and now have to construct in our head. And I could see very easily how a child whose world is pretty good comes face to face with the brutal reality of social status and power dynamics between people and utterly rejects it. I don't want any part of this. I don't want to ever have any power over anyone else because everyone who has power over me is horrible. And I want to be good. And good people don't use power over others.
That,
And then
yeah.
that would result in, well, I won't use force. I won't use force and violence. I won't use aggression through violence. I won't even use aggression in language.
Yeah.
And
Because,
that sort of shapes, like just, I know you want to jump in, but I just want to say that
yeah.
if you look at, if I was to define your personality in a very brief sentence, it would be along this axiom. Is you're a person who so hard to define.
I built myself.
No, you have no power to you.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
have much knowledge, you have much skills. You're a very well articulated and well put together intellectual figure, but you're
Yeah, this is like what you said previously about you and your wife both having the impression of me, I think relatively recent to when you met me, of I talk about serious things, but I'm not a serious person. And I've had that thing that you
mm,
said going around my head a few times, and it's the sort of thing that some people could get bent out of shape about it being said about them. So I want to say that that's not how I feel. I'm like, here's a thing that's attracting my attention that keeps coming up in my head. I need to dig into that more. And I want to, what you're saying about me being a
okay.
person without power, it's like it's like an itch. It's like, it's a little uncomfortable, and I want to see what's under there.
I appreciate you saying that. I sort of can't help but walk on eggshells. Um, that's more because of my first few years of marriage than anything else. Um, yeah, you're an analogy that's sticking out of my head, or the words that are coming to mind is like light. You're
As in
they
lightweight.
like yeah, like
Hmm.
lightweight. There's no gravity to you. It's you seem like someone who could be swept aside without consequence. You're not you, you do not seem like an obstacle that would be difficult to move. I think of you think of some people and you get the sense from them that I can't push this person.
Hmm.
And then others you go like, well, this is, I want to harp on the point. Very well put together person. And it's interesting that one can engage in dark ideas and yet not feel, I don't know, it's like you don't have a connection to them, not rooted in it.
Hmm.
It's hard to describe. I think this is an area that is
I can
mm,
I can pick up the concepts and and comprehend them and play
yeah.
with them, but at the same time I
It's
can
not
put them
a
down and walk away, and they're not part of me.
yeah, see that's it there. It's like the darkness, I don't know, it's not It's the
Just
thing about good men not needing rules.
yeah,
And you strike me as the kind of person who wouldn't need rules for himself.
that that phrase, "the good men don't need rules." I think that's an interesting one to explore just for a sec, because I'm not sure if it's a reference to something else, but for me, it's a reference to Doctor Who, where what was it?
That is where I got it from. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. How does the whole quote go? The anger of a good man is not to be feared. Good men have too many rules. Good men don't need rules. Now is not the time to find out why I have so many. And then if you go back to Nietzsche, where he points out that um, a harmless man is not a good man,
Mm.
and it's like that. The harmless man doesn't need rules because he can't do any harm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It doesn't matter what he does because his actions will never have any consequence to them.
mm, and
That's interesting.
mm,
Consequences. My brain linked the ability to have your actions be consequential to the ability to do harm, which I mean, sort of obvious, but I don't know, it's
mm,
striking me that there's
yeah,
a relationship there. A person is harmless because no matter what he did, even if all he did for his whole life was good, it would have no effect the same way that it would have no effect for bad.
mm,
You cannot make change for good if you are a person who cannot but inflict consequences. I
because
don't know what it is, but there's something there.
the word, the meaning that I get for the word harmless is not causes no harm in this Hippocratic Oath sense. It's has no effect.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's effectless. He he can be ignored.
yeah, a background character.
Hmm. And it feels like such a weird situation to be in of I'm trying to become dangerous, which from one conceptual framework that's an entirely good thing to do, but from the conceptual framework that I am starting from, it's like I can see the progression of or the likely progression of events as a child. It's like associating certain things with bad feelings, and if I am someone who needs to make the conscious decision to integrate, to construct my personality as I go, right? Rather than it being an involuntary process, it's voluntary. Like, this is what I choose to be, and this is what I choose to be, and not that. Rather than just being swept along with the impulses, then in some ways that opens you up to error in the sense of becoming a harmless person. But at the same time, it's like you reject the thing that bad feelings are associated with. People do things that make you feel bad, so you reject that the thing that is associated with those bad feelings, which
Mm,
is entirely logical within that context.
right. By rejecting, yeah, people did bad things to you, and by rejecting both them and your emotion at the same time because you didn't want to feel that pain, you weren't allowing yourself the opportunity to have a reaction. Um, so I get immense anger after I've been hurt.
Hmm.
So I'll be hurt, I'll feel the hurt, and then rage will come. But if you shut down at the hurt from others and never allow yourself to feel hurt by other people's actions,
Because rage was
then
what caused the hurt. So why would I want more hurt causing thing?
what? Their rage.
Yeah, well, rage, the concept of rage, the concept of anger, like if you take it from a
Right.
child's
You can get
associative
hurt by other things.
perspective.
You can be hurt by indifference. Because if it's the hurt from others' behavior towards you that you rejected in the first place, then
Mm.
you wouldn't be able to have secondary emotional reactions to that hurt if it's sort of that system's shut down.
It wasn't the. I don't know if. Nah.
I'm just going out on a limb here,
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah. I don't think it was the hurt that I rejected. It was the thing that I perceived as the cause of that hurt in the active sense. Like indifference
Mm,
causes hurt in a passive sense, where
interesting.
anger is an active thing, and you can't really
Yeah.
reject a passiveness. Well, you can, but
And
it
you
takes a bit more conception.
so it's malevolence itself. You were right.
So I
This
didn't.
is interesting. Have you got very far? You said before that you were able to pick up these ideas and play with them and then put them down. Have you got very far of trying to bring them into the fold this way, or have you mostly just had that experience you described of engaging with them, exploring them, and then it's not staying with you unless you're consciously focusing on it, you know?
By bringing feelings of what I can only describe as dominance up, like while driving to work, is a good time to do it, and sort of fiery strength and the ability to just say fuck the world, I'm doing my thing. And well, that feeling, by bringing it up every time I do that, it leaves a little bit more of a trace. It wears a track.
Feeling.
Hmm.
Okay. That's good. Because yeah, that's where I was going with it, is that it seems to me, by rejecting parts of your own emotions, which you would have had to have done in rejecting the the idea of willful harm, malevolence,
Hmm.
because we all have that within us. So young you would have had to have rejected that to suppress some of his own feelings. Um, in doing so, you seem, there's all conjecture and my guess, of course,
Hmm.
but to me, it seems like you retreated into your intellect and you built it up and built it up and built it up and made this massive, complex structure, which is good. You have a hyper developed intellect, and that's good. But it seems that you retreated there, away from the realm of feelings and unconscious motivations. You always strike me as a person who doesn't feel much, a person who thinks always.
Hmm. I think I had a proclivity in that direction and then reinforced it.
Mm, yeah,
So yeah,
it would have been a process started and
yeah,
just sort of continued on.
it's not an entirely voluntary or involuntary situation.
Mm. You put in both camps, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I was
and
just going to say, it
mm,
seems to me that if that is the case, that intellectually trying to engage with this topic is going to lead you nowhere.
mm,
That what you need to do is escape the intellect for brief periods of time or longer to be at the whim of your unconscious motivations and forces so you can become accustomed to them.
now understanding what the sentence you just said means is something I'm working on in the sense of like I had defined myself, my sense of self as my intellect. So
Ah,
while feelings were involved in that, they're also defined as part of my intellectual self, and so talk of getting out of my intellect into my feelings was a sort of a short-circuited meaning. And I'm,
You put the spirit of rationality in the highest seat of honor. You crowned that part of you.
yeah, yeah. And so
Hmm.
even understanding what it means to feel without thinking, or feeling versus thinking, is something I'm still developing, and like an acceptance of the idea of having any dominance. Like I'm coming to terms with the idea of having, oh, how did the analogy present itself? Like I'm the king of my space. Even if that space is only just around me, it doesn't end at my skin. So I'm the and that doesn't mean dominance over another. It's like you can have a meeting of kings in a neutral place, but that doesn't mean they're not kings.
You don't want to have your space intruded upon by the force of another. That's what your original child didn't want, and it sounds like to me that's what you don't want now.
I think that
Only,
this,
I was just going to say,
yeah,
only child you seems to have thought that the way to do that was to not be forceful in any way yourself, and that somehow that'll stop other people from doing it.
well,
A
if I,
rejection of the spirit itself, which I get.
yeah,
Like, oh, if only the world didn't have this,
yeah,
so I won't do
if I have no territory, it can't be invaded.
it. Fuck, that's brutal. That
It obviously sounds
I
more
think
brutal to you than to me, so please explain.
that no, that it's brutal because it sounds true. If I have nothing of my own, what can you take?
That also has reflections in the rest of my life of sort of,
It doesn't sound brutal to you.
well,
Doesn't feel like that statement should make you feel something.
oh, this, okay, translating, getting a hang of the feelings enough to grabbing onto them in order to try and translate them is tricky. So bear with me. But oh, you know the way I've lived for the past few years, essentially, it's like not chasing material possessions other than, or beyond a tiny amount, but basically seeking things that would make me useful rather than things to be mine. Um, and yeah, the idea of if I have no territory, it can't be invaded. If I have no possessions, they can't be stolen. It's like that. It feels accurate, which is why I don't get a accurate to my experience in a sense, as in that's what I was doing, and so it feels natural in a sense. Although I'm looking at it and listening to your reaction, and it's like I'm missing something here emotionally.
Yeah, that's not a good philosophy to live by. Um, I understand that you don't. It's hard to comprehend that, being that you seem to be in that state.
Hmm. I'm
It's interesting that your description went to the last few years of living and acquiring skills that would make you valuable, and all my brain said was, um, you were talking about not wanting to possess things, and you were talking about gaining and acquiring skills that make you useful, and in my mind, I had the connection of, I want to be possessed. Because what is that if not an advertisement to be possessed yourself? You have all these skills that are very great and useful, and you cannot define your own space. Please, someone come and take over my life, because I don't want to do it. Hence, I would say your ex-wife.
Mm.
She certainly took over your life,
Mm.
which you probably asked her to be honest. Not, not consciously, obviously. Although maybe, for all I know. But
Yeah, not consciously, but I don't think it's inaccurate. Concerning
there's
her,
there's yeah.
um, oh, she contacted me saying she had something she wanted to discuss that was relevant to both me and my son, and so I listened
Hmm.
to her and um
That was interesting,
mm,
actually. Before you go on,
mm,
you said my son, your son.
yeah, I don't feel like she has much claim on him as her son. Like ugh, there's
A light
no,
in the darkness. You drew a boundary around him,
yeah,
and you said my son.
yeah. I have noticed before that when it comes to him, like the potential for violent resistance is readily awakened. Like at work, there are times when jokes are made I would consider in slightly bad taste, and I haven't said anything because I understand the sense in which they're intended. It's guys trash talking among each other sense, in which case they bash each other and they lovingly include him in that, and I'm
Mm,
yeah I'm I'll have to think
I
more about
wouldn't.
how I feel about that.
Yeah, if you're having that reaction, I
Hmm.
would not allow it,
Yeah.
because yeah, perhaps it would be a good practice to have a moment like that and say, yeah, no,
Hmm.
that's not something that you do.
Yeah.
Like I have a hard line with that, with my wife.
Hmm.
People at work say many things about themselves, each other, their partners, and I have a very hard line on that one.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know the guys
I'd
at work
yeah.
would listen to that sort of thing. They are, oh,
Well,
they're
if
a,
you manifested that part of yourself,
yeah.
they would listen, and that's the point.
Well, both in the sense that I could make them listen, and in the sense that they would want to listen. So,
Mm.
good environment to practice in.
Well, make them listen. That's a good place to start.
Yeah.
I would, I would hold dearly to that distinction you've noticed when it comes to your son,
Hmm.
because in my opinion, what you need to do is you need to take that boundary that you've drawn around him and you need to extend it to yourself, and then push it out a little bit further to include your possessions and eventually a partner.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Because to not have that boundary around yourself is not healthy. I can understand how a child would want no part in that and try and take the moral route out. But the problem is, if you don't draw a boundary around yourself, someone else is going to draw a boundary around you.
hmm.
If you don't defend your space, you will be invaded. You know, waving the white flag doesn't guarantee safety.
Mm. And I
And I'm
intellectually
sure you learnt
understand and
that
agree.
hard way. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So here, good, because we come back to this thing about getting out of the intellect, which is also interesting, considering the other thing that we talked about before. Um, this is why people drink. In all seriousness, it loosens inhibitions and it makes a person driven more by their drives, and not by conscious action and choice. They're freeing themselves from their self-consciousness, mostly self-reflection, because most people find self-reflection incredibly painful.
Hmm.
Um, and also from what the yammering moralizing that the intellect can often do. And being more in touch with their emotions, they're more likely to want to have those things stop.
I feel like now this could be a justification or intellect trying to justify itself, but I feel like if the emotions, the will, and the intellect are in alignment, it can be a whole lot more powerful than just getting the intellect out the way with alcohol.
Agreed.
Hmm. Okay.
And I'm not saying that you should go and drink up a storm, but
Hmm.
my point is that that's a lot of the reason that most people do it. And you're
Hmm.
right. The alignment of the self with emotions and intellect on either side is you should be the being in between the two, not one or the other, is the state you should be aiming for. But as someone who's positioned themselves in the intellect and is thoroughly familiar with it and seems pretty unfamiliar with the other side, that's where you need to be. It's
Hmm.
all well and good to say, well, I should be in the middle. Like, okay. But you're not going to pull yourself to the middle if you only aim at the middle.
Hmm.
You're still going to be on that one side pretty slanted. You have to go all the way to the other to, well, to interact with it. You have to let it envelop you so you experience it.
Hmm.
And this is why substances, particularly alcohol, is such a big deal to, well, teenagers, effectively.
Ah, because they're getting all the new emotions coming up, and they use that to get the confusion out of the way and just feel.
Hmm. And the intellect at that point is starting to get full enough that its thoughts and diagnoses of the world can start to get painful. And
Oh,
a lot of people really want the intellect to shut up when it comes to criticizing themselves against the social hierarchy, which is what most teenagers are doing.
yeah. Because
I'm not good enough. I'm lesser. And boy, does alcohol shut all of that up, and it replaces it with I'm amazing.
something that I've noticed recently is part of this process. It's the thought came up that it felt like a teenage rebellion in a sense, like in a very controlled manner. Like I'm doing this consciously and deliberately and carefully, but at the same time, it's when skating around the ice skating rink and just feeling instead of thinking about everything or just observing. Yeah, the intellect takes the place of an observer. It doesn't leave, but it observes. And then the sort of having the confidence to smile at girls and try and keep up with the faster guys and just sort of play in a in probably the technically accurate sense, just playing around
Mm,
without thinking. Like I'm now
analyzing.
I'm
Dissecting?
I'm trying to practice skating, so there's something to sort of keep my attention focused and feel that and build up the muscle memory, and that's been successful. I've got better at that and practicing doing like single spins and practicing going backwards a little bit and things like that. Just sort of pushing the boundary gently, and it's not sort of you can't intellectualize muscle movements. And so that's where I'm focusing on thinking it. And oh, but that's where I'm focusing the processing power. The processing is not intellectual processing, it's feeling and physical processing. And feelings and like emotional feelings and physical feelings are closely linked. And
Hmm.
yeah, for
Well,
the
it's the body.
yeah, and for the adolescence, but instead of drowning my intellect in alcohol, I ran away into the intellect. Like I didn't have a teenage rebellion phase.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me.
So it feels like I'm kind of doing that at 30 instead. Oh,
Well, better late than never, I suppose.
yeah,
Um, I think the rebellion phase is really important, largely for this reason,
yeah,
because it's the spirit of fuck you.
yeah. Well, something along those lines that when my ex was contacting me, she had oh, things she wanted to discuss, and I was answering in a very, I think the phrase is brusque manner. Like I wasn't pulling any punches. I wasn't trying to be polite. If I thought you're being stupid about this or something like that, that's what I said. And the thing that has been most curious to me from an intellectual perspective, and this isn't the first time I've responded in that tone to her, she responded positively.
Yeah, she would.
Yeah.
You find that surprising, don't you?
Yes, because I sort of
Okay, why?
I psyched myself up for her to respond in anger, and it makes me think of right at the end of our relationship when she came home all upset about something and made a comment about oh not being satisfied with the relationship and or something along those lines, which was not an uncommon thing for her. And my response was maybe I don't want to carry on trying, or something along those lines. And there was a total 180 in her attitude. And that at the time I didn't care. I was over things. But that sort of oh yeah, it's like I don't care what you think type thing. It's like I don't care what you think of me.
Hmm,
Yeah, and that's one that
that's interesting.
I don't have a handle on in terms of I don't understand it enough to know when to
This
apply it.
this might be a weird statement.
Mm.
Um, I think a part of her really wants the best for you.
The things she's said in her messages line up with that. Like I think I've seen the narcissistic aspects and like particularly how she talks about other people. Like there was this guy who was helping her with her studies and she said some stuff and then it's like, why is he upset by me talking about these things? And for me, it's all obvious, but she doesn't empathize, like full stop. She consciously simulates it, but she doesn't understand it deeply, and she doesn't feel what other people feel in any sense, really. And
Well, she could be playing that. Like that could be a manipulation.
I think there is some degree of honest sort of bewilderment at what you have feelings. And she knows that people have feelings, but she doesn't know what they are unless they're explained to her. And I think she also sort of leans into that in the sense of, I'm helpless, I don't understand, someone please help me and explain everything to me so I don't need to put the effort into consciously understanding what's actually happening. Um,
Yeah, take responsibility for my own actions.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, psychopath. Um,
yeah. But she made some comments about
it's
how
interesting.
in terms of attractiveness, when we met, she rated me an 8 out of 10 and things along those lines. And it's like, really? That isn't what
Okay,
I thought of
from
myself.
interesting. From everything I've heard you say about her post divorce, you guys are actually divorced or
Yeah, yeah,
just separated?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I went
I
in.
suppose you had to for custody stuff.
Oh, custody was simple, which I thank God, however that's defined, that it was simple. She claimed no custody. Like at the start, when Wins asked her how much he was in her care, she said zero. And so the child support was decided by the government, by IRD or whatever, and it was paid to me. Well, it was paid to the government to reimburse them for the sole parent benefit, but yeah, it's like the child support was decided officially, and she never argued that, and she's never contested it, and she wants to have the odd video call with him a few times a year, every few months type thing. And I'm like, that's not a mother. That's a that's an auntie who's vaguely interested. That's not mother. And
Mm,
a part of me is angry at her for that.
good. Express it. I'm furious. You should go and have a hard go at her. Um, this is interesting. The more I
Hmm.
think about her, the more interesting I find this whole thing because I see lots of what my wife was early on in what you describe,
Hmm. I
and
have.
from what I've learnt through that process, I feel pretty confident in saying that what she wants is to be back with you, but she wants you to be the person that you're aiming at
Hmm.
through this discussion in particular. Hence the positive reaction to you being rude to her because it shows you being you and you're willing to not let her be in charge because she sure as shit doesn't want to be in charge. But if she thinks you're a pushover, she's going to push and push and push.
Hmm.
And if she can push you over, then you're clearly not the right person and maybe you deserve to be punished. Now, I know that's fucked up and I don't know how much that's standard or not with women.
Hmm. I think.
But I have observed a lot of women will do that until they find someone they can't push over. And then all of a sudden, they're kind, caring, compassionate, submissive women, which is weird.
Hmm.
You know, you could go into why evolutionarily or whatever. And I can see some good reasons. But as a guy, it's kind of a rough experience.
Hmm. Because I'm getting to. Well, I feel like I'm getting to the point of being able to not be a pushover, if that makes sense. And even if the ex wanted to come back, it's like, no, you burned that bridge. No, go away.
Permanently? Is there nothing she could do, no change that she could make to her personality that could see you forgive her and want to start a new relationship?
If
Yes or no, infinitely unlikely, whatever.
Yeah,
But
it's like not infinite, right? I would put
okay,
it outside the
yeah,
realm of possibility, but if I look at it from the
right.
perspective of hypotheticals,
Mm,
um, in terms of her personality, she'd need to want to. Well, a starting point would be recognizing that she needs to put effort in and develop herself, and that she can't just want a particular thing and then moan about how she's not getting it. And it's like, grow up, stop being a child, because she feels like a spoiled child who's worked out how to get everyone to give her what she wants by being helpless. And it's like, first off, sort out your own problems and don't demand or plead or whatever for everyone else to solve them. Sure, asking for help is, adults ask for help, but they don't moan for people to explain how everyone else is feeling and why they did all the things they did. They at least put some effort into solving their own problems. And secondly, it's like, develop some empathy. And it's like, sure, it might not be a an unconscious built in like most people, but you can develop it. You can build a reasonable approximation of other people in your head and understand what things mean. And she asks all sorts of questions, but like, something that I remember someone in her church mentioned was that she would always ask very simple questions. Like, she never graduated, in a sense. She never.
You're assuming she's being honest.
Yeah. I'm running with that
Yeah.
assumption that she is what she appears to be, rather than just
Yeah,
utterly manipulative.
I wouldn't have that as the assumption. I would actually go with the assumption that she's utterly manipulative.
Hmm.
Just from, I don't have an experience with her, obviously.
Hmm.
But I think that what she is and what my wife was is unbelievably similar.
Hmm.
And I've seen that change and turn around. Like, complete 180 from what she was, which is somewhat where your ex-wife is
Hmm.
was, to I come home from work, to meals prepped and served with, smiles and kisses and cuddles, babies laughing and running around, and she's helping them with everything that they need, and always caring and concerning for everyone while also looking after herself.
Oh, such patriarchal oppression.
She's never been more happy. And she's been very clear that the change was, I'm suddenly happy being me. I'm
Hmm.
happy in my own skin. Whereas before I wasn't happy in my own skin, so I seeked. Well, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
But
This links into something that, oh, another chain. Uh, Now, you know how I talked about mum being the authority figure at home as I was growing up,
mm,
and the idea that, which I think we've talked about before, of like, the idea of the man being the head of the household, the leader, is not so much a place that he takes, but at least this is how I conceptually remembered it. It's a responsibility and commensurate power bestowed upon him in recognition of his worth and worthiness as a man and husband.
if if the woman is a well put together
Yes.
and moral woman, if she's not, then it is taken, or it isn't.
Hmm.
Um, like in our situations, you took authority by saying it's over. And I would say that my guess is that up until that point, you did not have the authority.
Yeah.
And I took authority with an ultimatum. And up until that point, I didn't have authority. I thought I did, but no, I didn't. It was, looking back, I did not have the authority. I was being played expertly. And it's kind of amazing because I am far smarter than her, but she played me like a fiddle, which I think women are pretty good at in general because men never suspect it. Um, but once I had that authority, that once she ceded it to me, once she had given it to
Hmm.
me, because it had to be a choice. Because if she hadn't, then it would have been continued fights and fights and fights and fights and fights or whatever until the decision was made, like in your case, to, well, I'm taking the authority over my life back, and I'm doing it by kicking you out.
I ran away.
Well, you kicked her out of your life. That's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Your life is your life, and you're not going to be a part of it anymore.
yeah.
Even if you're running away, that's
Hmm.
still seizing back power over yourself and your being.
And I feel like ever since that point, I've been building myself up. I can it lays itself out quite clearly like that. It's like I was well, the lockdown happened and I was just day to day working out, well, living, living with friends where it's like I just moved in and slept on a couch and then a room opened up in the house and I moved in there and it was like, okay, I have a place and I don't need to worry about housing and that sort of thing. And so, and friends around me to help me manage life. And so it built from there. Then I got a job the next year, and then I got a different job and moved out, and um, yeah, got my own place and set it up and so on. And now I can call myself a young professional. Um, and it's building up, and I'm developing the ability to be king of my space, and I feel like sort of my territory extends sort of half as far as I can reach when I in just visually as I imagine it. It's like there's this little bubble around me that's my space, and yeah, I'm building myself up, and that feels like a good thing.
For sure it is. Mm.
Just thinking about in terms of women and relationships and the dynamics thereof, it's the way that I've conceived of it at the moment is oh, it's a very low fidelity map. It's a very blurry map, but it's uh oh, bring the conceptions down into words. I do my thing. I would respect her in the hypothetical as an individual. She has her own choices. I'm on this path. Would you like to join me? Or it's like I'm on this path. There is a space here that you could join if you
Mm.
wanted to. And the visual of so like being the armor around the home, the relationship, and I'm working my way through the experience from childhood of mum being the one who's in charge, and that's, I think, where the idea of needing permission to be in charge comes from, of permission to be
Mm.
strong, and sort of teasing out the subtle nuances of several concepts mushed together into one. And oh,
You said something interesting there that caught my attention. I
mm,
meant to take you off, but you seem to, what you're looking for seems to be for a woman to walk into your life who fits perfectly, whom you never have to, what, have the early relationship stresses of altering each other's personalities to form a unity. Your descriptions are all of someone who would fit perfectly with you. And that person will just sort of walk into the life and you go, hello, hello. Will we work? Yes, we will. Great. And then off you go.
mm. Yeah, I see what
And
you mean.
that seems very, well, one, very unlikely, but two, a very, I don't want to deal with the stress of what?
I think it's more that I'm like, rather than being utterly pushed around, that conception is I will not be pushed around at all, possibly in a counterbalancing sense, and trying to work out. Because even if I've
Well,
got all
yes, like
this
like
conception,
that's good. Yeah.
I'm still a negotiator by personality.
Okay.
Hmm.
You're definitely right. You do not want to be pushed around. But from what I've got from your descriptions of the person you're looking for, you've described a person who wouldn't push you at all.
The
You
way,
described,
yeah, I
you've
think of it
always
more
described
as,
someone who wouldn't push you,
yeah,
a person who would be receptive and open and you could discuss things. And
hmm, yeah. There's probably a few subconscious contradictions in there because I get one visual image of like being a rock that the wave breaks over, and listening to the wave but not being pushed around by it, if that makes sense.
well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, she is going to push you.
Hmm. And things like emotions matter, facts also matter. Like, just because emotions do not trump facts, both must be taken into consideration. Like, if she, hypothetically, to use a stereotype, has a dream where I cheated on her, it's like, okay, the the emotions you have from that are real, and
Nah,
they,
see, you've already failed. Like off the bat,
mm,
you're you're giving you're giving her emotion that she's feeling credit. What you've just done is you've validated her story. You've before you have even become before you have even started the conversation, you've negotiated half of your position away. And as a general rule, I could see you doing this a lot in a relationship. So your ex, who brings up a problem, and you by instinct go, well, I can understand and sympathize as a starting point, thinking that's going to curry you some negotiating favor. But if
mm.
you're negotiating with someone who is acting in bad faith, let's say, then your acts of what? Compromise are just going to be taken advantage of. What you need to be, the rock who doesn't move, is the one who doesn't move. This is, no. Oh, I had this horrible dream about it. I was like, well, that sucks, but it didn't happen. Obviously, the dream example is a bad one. And I know I'm sort of picking at you a little bit with this,
No, go ahead.
but I think even though the example of the dream situation is unfair of me to pull this sort of attack at you, your approach in this scenario with the dream thing is probably the way to go. However, I can feel pretty confident in saying that almost any confrontation you have with your partner or your ex partner would have gone along these lines. She has a problem, a complaint, a thing she wants to do, a thing that you're doing that she doesn't like. And you start out of the gate by sympathizing and understanding and trying to explain and reasoning and then negotiating and down the tree.
Mm.
Rather than simply going, lol, no, which is the rock and the wave which you described.
Mm. So another uh, strategy scenario approach would probably be the better term that came up in my mind recently was uh, born out of your comment of me not being someone to take seriously by emotion. No, by I don't look like someone to be taken seriously, even though I deal with serious topics. Um, Saying nothing is worth something in the sense of I tend to spout out things in a sort of stream of consciousness a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But
This one gets me in trouble quite a bit.
okay, I'll finish and then you elaborate.
Yeah, you
But
know, yeah. Sorry, I find
um,
it funny.
the idea of rather than uh, saying things and negotiating, just sit and observe and sort of be the rock and work out what to say. It's like there are what is it? A sort of derivation of anything you say or do can and will be used against you. That saying nothing is a valid, it's a neutral move. It's a move that can't be used against you.
Yeah, it can. Oh, yeah, it can.
Okay,
It's not a neutral move. That's why. It's a judgment.
that a
So, for
response
an
is not
example,
warranted.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it's as an example. Um, this used to happen a lot with my wife, and it pissed her off incredibly. I got sick and tired of telling her that X thing that just happened was wrong and that she needed to fix it, and then having a whole argument because we argued a lot, and I would never back down. Um, except when it came to the moment of, well, then we'll end the relationship. Then I backed down, and that was, you know, how she maintained control over me effectively for the years, until the day that that didn't happen, and then that's the change. Anyway, I got sick of having a go at her or saying that was wrong and then having the argument. So she would do something or say something, whatever, and I would just sort of sit back and look at her. And that would piss her off, and she'd have a go at me for, like, don't do that, because you can feel it when someone does that. It's like boring holes in your soul. Person feels
Hmm.
judged and seen. And they'll lash out and lash out and lash out. And it's quite effective. And after a while, you sort of go, look, I don't need to say anything because you know this all already. So either you do it or you don't, but it's on you. And then you can, walk away or whatever else. Um,
Something
I
like this
generally wouldn't
was
get to that point because the silence was enough. She'd get mad and mad and mad and mad and mad, and then eventually it would break.
something like this was happening in the I say conversations, but they weren't really conversations with the ex. I would my only addition to the conversation would be this isn't about our son. And then she had a whole conversation with me where that was my only input and things like I know you think I'm shallow for these things I'm saying and so on. It's like, no, I can look back at what I said. I said basically nothing. And this all came from you. And slightly different context in the sense of it wasn't a rant from her, it was her uh, wanting advice, and I was just saying, just not replying. And like the response of uh, hypothetically to her being unreasonable in some way, hypothetical future relationship her, um, of a laugh and no, that's silly, feels a little uncomfortable to me, possibly because of a lack of developed emotional spine on my part, possibly due to a more agreeable personality. But
Sorry,
the
could you reframe
yeah,
that bit?
that was very
I
rambly.
feel like
Sorry.
it's really no, it's good. Just that last bit. I feel like it's really important, but I didn't quite
Yep.
catch it.
Um, responding derisively to her feels uncomfortable to me, probably due to my agreeable personality, but
Responding to what?
it's responding to what I perceive in the context as unreasonable emotional rambling, going off about something that,
Right.
yeah, something that I feel like something for which a judgment emerges within me. Because it's not like you
What's the
don't,
judgment?
well, the judgment isn't a conscious thing necessarily. It's not an intellectually thought out thing. It's a, you look at it, you process it, and it's like, I don't I don't like this, or this is bad, or something like that. And
Okay.
then yeah, sort of the calm
Okay. Why
statement
is it
of
bad?
yeah,
Why
you
is it bad?
yeah, you're acting unreasonably or something, or that doesn't make any sense, or I don't like that, I'm not doing it, or something like that. And then she gets upset, and the sort of I'm not engaging with this, and then silence or walking away.
But
Just
you are. You're receiving it.
hmm,
You never swore at her, did you?
no.
Do you ever tell her to shut up or anything like that?
I don't think I ever swore at anyone. I don't. Shut up is one of the. It's not as blacklisted in my vocabulary as fuck off, but it's in the don't use or shit. It's like they're all in the decided not to use zone.
Wow. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
want to help, and this is great. This is really good stuff. But it's just so amazingly foreign to me. Because I had you know Xbox Live when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Um,
Teenagers
yeah, no one
competing to
like
be
you
the
was on there.
rudest.
Oh, it's as ridiculous as you could imagine. You know,
Yeah.
all the way up until the most horrible things and Holocaust things.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just insults. It was yeah, it was everything. It was interesting. There's so much here. Do you think, would you like to see her change? If that were to happen, if you saw that, would you like it? Or would you like to see it happen?
Okay, yeah, those are two different questions.
Yeah, the second one. Would you
Yeah.
like to see it happen?
Yeah, yeah. Not. I tried processing it after the answer came up, and it didn't go anywhere. So just yeah, I would like to see her. Well, that's an interesting phrasing to emerge in my head. Be less of a
Mm.
bitch, which is another word I don't like using.
I think it's
Oh, my internal
applicable.
sensor. Yeah.
No, this is good. You should continue doing this. Uh, um, that's good. I'm glad you said that. Hmm. Do you think that if one were to try to get her to help her to be better, that one would do that by being supportive and understanding?
It's weird the way these answer. Oh, I'm in the free association response mode, but also watching that intellectually, and it's really weird to be both at the same time. It's like, no, you wouldn't be
I love it.
supportive. And then I go to process that, and it's like, no, you didn't get access to the processing for that, but it's a read-only answer. You don't get to see what was behind it.
Yeah, because it's not conscious, because you don't want that part of you to be conscious. Or you haven't in the past. You do now.
Yeah.
Um, okay.
It would be,
So if that's not the
yeah,
way to do it, how do you do it?
ultimatum. No, that has issues too, but what is
It's
it?
in the ballpark though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like say no. It's like treating a child. It's like, um, okay, child, your behavior is unacceptable. If you do this behavior, this thing that you do not like will occur. If you if you do this thing again, a toy will be taken away. And it's like it's that feels like the sort of thing that would be needed. And then
Force, aggression.
basically, yeah, yeah, force her into a corner where she's got no choice but to grow up a bit.
Here's another strange question that might be interesting to hear the answer. Would you enjoy doing that to her?
The first response is um not indifference. It's I have no. Oh no. Did I just distill that feeling down? Hang on. She's not worth my time. Is yeah, that's the first response.
First response, all right. Did you get a second?
Hmm. There's a potential for oh, these phrasings are not what I would choose consciously, but malevolent glee. There's a sense of potential for malevolent glee if not potential, it's like a sort of rubbing hands and now it's your turn. Have a taste of your own medicine type. Well, that's hang on a minute. That carries implications.
Really? What implications might those be?
Just the way that's phrased. like looking at it almost as though it was a different person who said it. It's like it implies that I think that's what she was doing to me. Uh,
Hmm.
that's an interesting one. There's a
That is,
guy,
even I hadn't thought about that, but no, I could see that.
David Dieter, who's specialized in masculine feminine interactions, and his stuff's not to everyone's tastes, but I looked into it for a little while, and he talked about a pattern of behavior where a woman would test her man by being a bit of a bitch to prove that he wouldn't be pushed around, to make him resist being pushed around by it. So as in,
Hmm.
oh, I need to prove to myself that you won't be pushed over, so I'll give you a shove type thing. And then he mans up and pushes back, or at least, or or stares at her derisively and ignores the push, and it's like shows that he's immovable, something along those lines. And then she feels secure. Yeah, then she feels secure again. And in one
Hmm.
sense, it's pushing him to be strong enough to push back. It's like, come on, grow a spine, come on, sort of grow up, whatever. It's like, give back what I'm giving to you, in a sense. Give as good as you get. And I'm wondering if that's the pattern that my ex was partly, or at least that's how it feels to me, that she was. Yeah, that fits with other things. That she was trying to whip me into shape in a sense, where the
Through
word
punishment.
whip is chosen deliberately.
Yeah, through punishment.
Hmm.
This fits with my experience as well. Very, very well. It's interesting actually because I can ask Lauren about that
Hmm.
and see what she says. Hmm.
Because there's a
Does that
concept of.
reframe your perception of her a little bit?
Hmm. It reinforces the speculation that I've had for a while that if I'd sort of stood up and told her to shut up, basically, then things would have gone much better. If I'd
Hmm.
said, no, I'm not being pushed around just because you want to. No, I'm not going to be pushed around. It's like, and the main issue that comes to mind about that is that I love my parents and I'm going to have my relationship with them. You can butt out of that. And the way I'm reassessing how I'd assessed that whole situation before, because she had a toxic relationship with her parents and pushed to make my relationship with my parents toxic too. And I've wondered whether standing up and saying no to that sort of thing would have had a positive outcome, seeing the way that my current bluntness to her and messages has been positively received.
Hmm. Well, I think that's highly likely, as the
Hmm.
case with probably most of the fights.
Hmm. Because at the end, when I did say no, she didn't escalate. She pushed for me to let her escalate.
What do you mean?
Well, one of the ways the fights often went was that she'd be upset and oh man, this sounds more than a
Well,
little
it's all
pathetic in
right.
retrospect, but she'd
Believe me, I would have been in the same position as you. So, no judgment here.
there was one time when we'd gone over to China to meet her family over there, and she got in a rage, and I was kneeling down, sort of pleading with her and so on, and she slapped me so many times that my teeth moved in my mouth and I got a black eye from it. And I know that my teeth moved because I never used to be able to touch my front teeth together, top to bottom. But after that, I could.
Wow. Okay, that didn't happen to me. Jesus Christ, dude.
Mm, yeah, so it was good before then because I've got two porcelain caps on my front teeth paid for by ACC, and not being able to touch the teeth together meant I couldn't bite them. Like the back teeth would touch first, and I couldn't do anything to damage those front ones as long as I didn't have anything in my mouth. But then after that, I could touch them together.
Okay. Um, that's not where I expected that to go. It's kind of thrown me a bit, to be honest.
Yeah, and that sort of thing was the most standout one, but that sort of thing, that category of event was repeated.
Interesting. I remember my wife attempting to hit me at some points, but I never let her. I
Hmm.
always restrained her when she tried that. And that was often met by uh, a breakdown into tears where all the anger disappeared immediately. And then it was reunion, like straight after that, which is interesting.
See, whenever I tried restraining, it wasn't a no, I'm not going to let you do this. It's a please stop.
Yeah, I wasn't kind about it.
Yeah.
Not that I hurt her or anything, but I was being aggressive.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's
And
I think I have
yeah.
probably going back to our earlier discussion. I have an enjoyment in danger, probably
Hmm.
because of that part of the aggression that I have integrated.
Yeah.
So there have been times when she went into a rage effectively and was yelling or screaming or whatever, or telling me to leave or threatening violence or trying to hit me or whatever else like that. These were incredibly far and few between, I'd like to say, in defense of my wife, who I love. And it's like a handful of times I can remember over the course of 5 years. But the danger of staying was a thing that I reveled in.
Hmm.
I enjoyed that. I don't know, that I was charging into a situation that was supposed to be dangerous, which never ended up being, which is interesting. But I don't know. Hmm.
Hmm. The
Something
one
there.
time I did just say no when she said to stand there and let her hit me was I'd been basically deciding this can't go on for a while, and she'd decided to that we should go on a trip to the Wairiki boulders to between here and Dunedin, a bunch of unusually spherical rocks on a beach. And so we'd gone there, and came back, and or we were on the way back, and we'd stopped for a walk, and um, she'd worked out because of the way I was phrasing things, because I don't, yeah, I want to say I don't lie, but that would probably be a bit arrogant. But I certainly don't. I think it's something wrong to do, similar to the malevolence that I talked about previously. Like lying was in the same category as being malevolent, or similar category. A bit easier to do than that. But anyway, she'd figured out that I wasn't wanting to carry on the relationship, and she got all huffy about it. And when I said, no, I'm not going to let you hit me, then she fumed for a while, and we pulled over a while later, and uh, she sort of settled down, and it was sinking in, oh, so the relationship's going to end. And things took a bit longer in terms of the next week or so after we got back to Christchurch, but um, uh, yeah, that was the first time I think I stood up and said, "No, I'm not going to let you do that."
Hmm.
And then she backed down.
I think it's interesting. I think what I've been able to take from this wee arc that we've gone on is that sometimes, although I reckon this is more often than people would admit, a young lady will find a young man and will somehow be able to see the greatness in him that he will be when he's a man, though he's not quite yet. And she'll go after him and go after him and go after him until he hardens into one. And if he doesn't, then she'll break the relationship through that process. But it's not what she wants.
Mm,
From what we've discussed, what I think is that what she genuinely wanted was for you to not put up with her shit, but still want her to stay.
mm,
And what she wanted, yeah, what she wanted was for you to, was to not be, she wanted you to not let her get away with it, to constrain her behavior in to a place that you wanted her to be, where she felt comfortable, defined by what you wanted her to be. And that didn't happen in your case until you had already decided before you stood up to that it wasn't going to work. You left no possibility.
mm. Yeah, those sort of rages were probably a monthly occurrence, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not justifying her behavior at all. I'd like to make that clear. I'm not making any, I'm not condemning it either. I'm not making any moral
Mm,
claims on this weird process that we're looking at. But I would say, in her own way, what she wanted was the best for you, which was to, well, grow a spine, I suppose,
mm. I feel like
and
this pattern
to keep
is,
her around.
yeah, yeah, because once I was saying, no, I've given up, I don't want to do this, then oh, then she toned right down, and there was one time she came home and all grumpy. This was in that last week, and then I was like, well, I don't want to carry on trying with this. And then she did a complete 180, and uh, yeah, it's the sort of pattern you're describing there, and it's like the overall pattern in a wider social sense. It also makes sense, like how many. Uh, there's a pattern that Dad's described to me, which he's sensitized to by how his mother was dictatorial in the house and got whatever she wanted, and very mean to Dad's dad. Um,
Hmm.
and so,
Funny that his relationship mirrored that.
well,
To a lesser degree, I know.
yeah, yeah. In some
Yeah.
ways it did, in other ways that he was consciously aware of, it did not at
Mm.
all. Like
No,
the
I get it.
yeah,
I just wanted to throw that in. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
and
you were
I've
saying.
I've seen the similarity there, but the um he does a lot of stuff at the yacht club and has done a lot of work to build up the membership, not in the sense of seeking members, but in the sense of making it a fun place to sail, because he wanted a fun place to sail. And a lot of guys would say things like, "Oh, I'm only allowed out for one day this weekend." And that sort of being constrained from your hobbies was something that Dad was hypersensitized against by his childhood. And so, like when he and Mum were much younger, before I was born or around that time, uh, he'd go off gliding, gliding up and down the country with a bunch of his friends, and Mum would make dinner, put it in the microwave. Dad would get home sometime and eat it. And Mum
Hmm.
wouldn't pressure Dad to be home at a certain time, where all the other wives were nagging at their husbands to get home at the right time to have dinner, and complain about how Dad was keeping them out too late and so on, where Mum just went along with that. And that was a lot of why Dad didn't run off, in a sense, because he said that whenever previous relationships had started becoming controlling and women had started trying to control his behavior, he'd just walked off.
I would say that she didn't just let that happen. My assumption would be that early on in the relationship there was a fight about that, and he put his foot down, and then she accepted it.
In that sense, yes. Yeah, yeah, some sort of this is where I stand,
Yeah,
and I will not be moved from this, and possibly a few nudges, and it's like, no, I'm doing my thing. And I can totally see Dad not budging on that.
bit of a blight of the age of men letting women lead in this spirit. Seems to me that I wonder how much of the feminine desire to quote unquote lead is this spirit and how
Mm,
much of it is genuine leadership.
mm,
Because there seems to be a lot of this on the social scale of
mm,
running wild until contained in, like the association that's always drawn between the radical feminists and loving Islam.
mm. There was something, there's a correlation here with, oh, I always felt like the way my ex acted was like a triggered fight or flight instinct. That she got, rabid is the word that comes to mind, but like
Mhm.
crazed. And I've from oh, a female YouTuber, not sure quite what to call her. A little bit of a spiritual teacher, a little bit of a relationship counselor, a little bit of a self-help teacher. Um, I've watched a bunch of different sources and um, I pick and choose what makes sense to some degree. I don't just say, this is the answer. But she described this concept of containment or ownership where
Mm,
it's like not in the explicitly not in the sense of this is my thing to do with as I please, right? But in the sense of okay, the guy who spends hours polishing his car every weekend and it's in perfect condition and he takes his shoes off before he gets in and so on. It's like his car is cared for. Like that's the sort of ownership she was talking about in a sense, like where a in the hypothetical scenario, a man has the responsibility to care for his wife and provide a space for her to be and flourish. The flower in the garden type thing, where he will go and be tough and um, keep the gentle space open for her where she can let her femininity flourish, where she can be gentle and kind and nurturing and fully move into that instead of having to have a tough outer shell to endure the
and
world.
the constraints.
Sorry?
Yeah, creativity constrained
Hmm.
is the true creativity, not left unchecked.
Constrained might be the
Boundaries,
wrong word, but contained, like enclosed,
yeah,
like in a pearl in a shell. Like he's the shell
well,
who protects the beautiful pearl inside, and she is in no way well, no, in some ways restricted, but not.
boundaries are supportive.
Yeah, like kids without boundaries are
Walls, yeah,
miserable.
yeah, exactly. They love to feel that safety of when I run to the edge of everything that I know and am able to do, I run into dad and he's
Hmm.
there like, no, this is dangerous. You go back. And they're like,
Hmm.
ah, and they run back. Like my daughter, this is quite funny actually. My little youngest daughter, who is slightly scaring me with how smart she is. She was upset today and she was having a bit of cry on the floor because she wanted milk. And I was talking to my wife and I looked down at her and I went, you know, can you shut up? Like you've got everything you need and we've told you what you're going to get and you need to wait like 2 minutes for it. And then she looked up at me and she smiled at me. She was like, okay. And then she sat there and waited and then she got what she wanted, which is strange. I was not expecting that. I was sort of, feeling a little guilty about my outburst immediately after doing it. And she just looked up and she was happy. She was like, I like this. My behavior was constrained. Um, there's something to that notion
Hmm.
because total freedom is chaotic. It's drowning. If you're dropped into the world and you're told do anything you want, you're gonna sit there with decision paralysis
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
gonna feel miserable. But if you're like, okay, you have to do this at this time today and this at this time today, but between those two things, you can do what you like. People are like, oh, sweet, okay, I could do this. It's just constraining that in. You can do these three things, whichever you like,
Hmm.
and
There's a little bit of an
it's
inherent
protective.
rejection of that in our society as well. Like,
Yeah, that's the feminist revolution. Do not place any constraints on any woman, and I suppose individualism in itself.
I think it has deeper
Although
roots.
society does quite a bit of that.
Like,
What do you mean?
well, Our society is built around the idea of expansion and growth and breaking of limits. Think of the lone
Yeah,
inventor breaking the limits of
and
previously
tradition.
understood things. It's the whole
Yeah,
society. It's not just
yeah.
yeah,
We don't respect traditions enough. We think that breaking them is the goal.
yeah, yeah.
And
Find a good
then what
enough reason.
structures do we have? Yeah, what structures do we have left to stand upon? Or walls to protect us,
Yeah. It's not to
where the
say that
barbarians are fucking coming in at every angle.
yeah, it's not to say that whatever we had before was necessarily right or perfect because it was already there. But in 99% of cases, if you want to replace a piece of the core structure of society or reconfigure it, you'll be wrong if you just want to swap it out. In saying that,
Yeah,
it's like the gradual change of, I think this change to the things would be a massive improvement, and da 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 da. It's like, well, this subtle change here will make things better. And like the votes for women movement, it's like, um,
subtle change that was.
well, that's
Jesus,
not the right example of a subtle change, but the idea of here is a structure which generally works, but this bit could be better. Let's change this 1% here. And so some people change it in one area, and then other people look at it and say, oh, that seems to have worked. It's not catastrophic, at least. And
not
then,
immediately.
no. But it's complicated, and that issue has other things associated with it. But the idea that you should proceed forward carefully because there is great value in the accumulated structures you have. Like Victorian attitudes towards sex are widely viewed as stupid these days. But in the context of how easily diseases of sexually transmitted kinds could spread and the lack of effective treatments and so on in those days, it made a lot of sense. Like if you slept around, got pregnant as a woman, and got syphilis, then you were done in society. Like you would probably die along with your children, and if not, it wasn't much better. And yeah, like the medical realities of the time informed their attitudes towards it. And then medical treatments improved and contraception and so on, and stuff changed, and we're still trying to work out how to deal with the resultant differences. Yeah, so stuff's complicated, but the
Yeah, there's
past
never
has
a simple
lessons.
answer to anything.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing because it's not something that anyone would talk. Well, I say that. Lots of places online are speaking about these kinds of things now, which is good.
Hmm.
There seems to be a bit of a renaissance in discussing what are men and what are women and how do we interact with each other. Because
Hmm.
knowledge on that front was passed down for like thousands of years until like 60 years ago when one of the generations decided not to teach their children anything about what it is to be a man or a woman.
Hmm.
And I don't know why. Like, I actually don't know. And I'm not even sure which generation it was, but there was a break there somewhere.
Hmm.
And I know that, like, no one in our generation and hardly anyone in the generation before us was taught how to be a man by their father or how to be a woman by their mother. They were sort of, I don't know, felt like abandoned,
Hmm.
neglected in that front. We'll teach you everything else about the world, but not that.
I feel like part
Never
of
that.
that's worth expanding. Like how to be a man or how to be a woman is not just how to here's a social construct that we like. It's not just that. It's like
Yeah.
you have a bunch of stuff built in, and other people, like if you're a man, you have a certain approximate physiological and psychological structure. And here's a woman who has another certain physiological and
In
psychological structure, and here is how
in
you interact
relation to each
positively.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's what is it to be a man when you are alone? Are you interacting with another man and you're interacting with a woman?
Hmm.
Because that changes your behavior for sure. And if you're interacting with no one, then what does it even mean?
Yeah. It's like here is a role to fill, not necessarily saying that you
Mm.
must fill that role, although it often was portrayed in that way, but here is a role that functions. And then you take that away, and it's like, okay, out of all the possible roles to fill, the infinite potential variety, find one that works. It's like all
Yeah,
but
that's a recipe for
uh,
depression right there.
yeah, all but a tiny fraction won't work. So people will try a few and not see what will work, and then you'll just sit there and die.
You know what I think is even more egregious than the not teaching us how to be a man as a man, but the opposite of our parents, and I'm sure their parents and maybe one before that, weren't taught what the opposite sex was. I think that's the key.
Hmm.
As a young man, I don't think most young men, are taught about women. And I don't think most women are taught about men, except
Yeah.
for in a very derisive, they're bad kind of way at this
Oh,
point.
yeah. These days it's
But but the
oh
idea
yeah.
of, 50, 60, 70 years ago, a young man was taught how to be a young man, but he was also taught by men what is a woman and how to interact with her, and how
Hmm.
you should behave towards her, how she will behave towards you. How is she different from you? Because this is one of those things where um, women, I will hear women say things that they want or try and give advice to men on dating things, and the answer is always don't listen to a woman on this
Hmm.
because women don't understand how they are different to a
Hmm.
man from a man's perspective. They understand how they're different to a man from a woman's perspective.
Hmm.
So they could teach their daughters about men from a woman's perspective because they see their differences from their side of the table. But for a man trying to understand women, he needs to hear about it from men because men are men and can explain it to him.
Hmm.
Whereas a woman will try and explain it to him as if he was a woman. And it won't work.
I think there are exceptions to that in the sense of people who are sufficiently consciously aware of themselves and those around them to articulate it.
Yeah, but
This is both men and women.
even then that would feel like an 80% solution. And yes, this goes both ways. Like if it was a man who was exceptional in the way you were describing, I feel like he would still be like 80% of the way there to what a good woman describing to her own daughter about men would be in
Mm,
that example.
yeah. My personal solution to the conundrum is listen to both. It's like listen around, find the men and women who seem exceptionally
Mm.
um, well attuned in this area so they can see the right stuff to say. Listen to them both and sort of just let it all stew and come together.
Well, this explains that sort of mini renaissance that's going on YouTube and other places about everyone talking about what is a man, what is a woman, and how do they interact together.
Mm,
Because we weren't taught that for a while, and then we were tried to be told lies, and that just didn't wash. Obviously, that fight's still going on to date us, but yeah, leaving that aside, it wasn't taught, and now people want to know.
mm,
Like most men are not particularly aware of how menstrual cycle hormones affect women's behavior, like at all.
mm,
They just sort of see, oh, she gets, I don't know, upset once a month, and it's got something to do with the bleeding.
mm.
That's it.
Yeah, you're sounding a bit muffled. I think your microphone's covered by something.
Yeah, my apologies.
Yeah,
Well, we're probably getting a bit late. We should call it anyway, but
yeah, yeah. There was something I saw recently about, oh, was it men being horrified by tampons and sanitary pads and that, and women laughing derisively about how men didn't understand them, and it's like both sides are wrong. It feels like.
Yeah, someone had to not keep up the education in order for this to happen.
Hmm.
This wasn't like one side failed and the other didn't.
Yeah.
Because modern women are just as unhappy with the situation as modern men.
Hmm.
Speaking about that, actually, the whole men going their own way thing.
Hmm.
Like a large part of, particularly our generation, is just not dating guys,
Hmm.
and just doing their own thing and stuff. That's sort of gone, by the wayside, unacknowledged for a while. But now
Hmm.
I've started to notice a lot of young women are coming out and complaining about it. The ones who don't whore effectively,
Hmm.
the ones who aren't playing the, many different men aiming at the top polygamy game, which is bad for its own reasons, obviously, are coming out and being like, hey, I'm like 25 now. This is kind of a problem.
Hmm.
It was all well and good and cute when I was 22, but now I'm 25 and I haven't had my first kiss yet.
Hmm.
Um, this needs to change. This isn't okay because we're going to start having some problems. I've only got a few years left, and it's like, well, this is
Yeah.
it's come home to roost. Effectively, it took a few years, but this wee thing that guys were doing, particularly in our generation, is sort of starting to hit home now. Of hey, you need two to tango in this, and if you take away everything from men, they're not just going to take that. They can go, okay, that's fine. We'll just have nothing to do with you. And then what do you have? You don't have men. And there's nothing more that a woman wants than man. And yes, obviously that goes the other way around, but you know,
Yeah.
women aren't the one who have had everything taken from them. Somewhat they have, but it's been by other women. That's something that I'm sure one day be used against me. But you know what? I stand by that statement.
Well,
And I'm tired. That's gonna probably go
yeah.
to bed.
I'm just
I'm
thinking
supposed
of
to be
the
asleep
yeah,
ages
yeah.
ago.
We should definitely wrap up soon. But
No, it's all right. I'm being funny.
I'm just thinking of the implications for the next 50 years. Like we've got the birth rate's still dropping, right? And the
Eh,
UN predictions are all about it. They show it coming back towards replacement, and then all the population predictions are based on that. But it's still going down, and this sort of stuff is still happening, and it's not going to reverse on a society-wide level. I think there'll be pockets where it gets worked out, where there are subcultures of men and women who work out how to do it, like courting's coming back as a thing. Um,
mm,
and yeah, there'll be positive responses, but I think the proportion of the population who have that positive response will be relatively small, and Darwin will have his day. Um, it's like,
yeah, I'm gonna have plenty of kids. That's that's part of the.
yeah, it's gonna be. Oh, I think you made a comment previously about the people who are knuckling down at self-improvement at the moment, and not just in the shallow sense, but in the deep I want to be a better person, Peterson and so on sense. Um, the people who are doing that will be getting results, right? It's not a fast process, but it's a a glacier can grind down a mountain given time. Like it may be glacial, but it's carving a path. And as those men on that path mature in that path, they're going to start having an impact. And I think it'll be a positive impact.
Yeah.
I hope.
I think you can be pretty confident about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it'll change the overall path, but I think it'll definitely become noticeable.
You'd be surprised what a single man can do when he's got a reason to stand up and
Hmm.
stand fast.
Shall we end it
I think,
there?
yeah, I think we should probably leave it there.
Yeah. Oh well. To the men
More to
who would be
contemplate for
kings.
next time. Mm,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
Be curious to know what your dreams are tonight. I feel like we've opened a few doors here and there that are going to reshape your conceptions a little bit.
Yeah, I think that it's gone in and it'll be processed subconsciously rather than consciously.
Mm,
But
it'll emerge.
yeah. It's funny, I don't tend to remember that many dreams. It's more the what is it? If you give your subconscious a voice, it talks to you. And
Mm,
I've put some time into that and deliberately listening to my subconscious, and so it doesn't need to sneak things in through dreams. It just tells me.
I think I'm in a similar situation, but I almost never have dreams now. Although I
Yeah.
can induce them on purpose. I find that if I've woken up and then I go back to sleep, to like sleep in, where will I dream?
Mm. Yeah.
But throughout the night, just hard sleep.
Yeah. Like there are still dreams, but they're not memorable dreams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I haven't had anything serious memorable in a long time. Although
Yeah.
every time I do, it's seriously important.
Mm. Yeah. The
So I still have the capacity, I suppose.
the stuff that oh if I wasn't listening to my subconscious, the stuff that I think would come through in dreams is like that the sword that I converted the potential for mindless violence into in the symbolism of my head, like where the the attitude to the world that it holds or would manifest is just die. It would cut, and like being able to correspond in a to be able to communicate with it without having to sort of beat down a door in my head is useful. Like I don't
Mm.
need to be overtaken by it. I can pull it up, experience it, and then put it down without anything else having to trigger it. And yeah, it's good to
Well,
have those doors
I
open.
reckon we should go and be enveloped by it. Pretty late at night. Let's go dissociate from the intellect for a bit.
Yep. Yeah.
We'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.